Hey there, welcome back to my channel. In the last episode, we have worked on our TDD section where we have added pretty much a good amount of the test cases here. You can see we have covered pretty much all the services right there, where catalog service is exposing the create product, update product, get and get, edit and delete products, etc. Besides that, we learned like how we can mock the data also, right? So dynamically we can create the data using the factory from the Rosie. In this episode, we are going to work on the API section where we will write the code with the help of TDD again, right? So you can see some of the code, it might be helpful for us, right? So as an example, we are going to reuse this factory, right? Which is already been used from the Rosie, or maybe we can just like, make some kind of library right here. Maybe we can move some of the codes to the util directory where we can reuse the code. That is the section we can cover, but before that, let's try to understand what are the things we need to cover in this case, right? So first of all, let's maintain the similar kind of the pattern, which is we have followed for our services. Just like we need to create one directory that is called test, right? __ test, right? This is the directory where we will keep our API, the test files. Right? So potentially it's going to be like catalog route.test, something like that. So let's try to add that new file. Perfect. In the TDD, we are going to add some code right here in the test file. Then we are going to cover the actual functionality here, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, a couple of things going to be needed, right? First of all, we need Supertest. So already we might have installed the Supertest here. You can see we have installed the Supertest here as a dev dependency, and we have installed the types version also, right? So make sure like these are the versions we should have to install, right? So later stage, I'm gonna show you like how we can use the pinned version of the Node libraries, which is make your applications going to be stable, all right? That is we can cover up. So now let's try to import our request here. Import request from Supertest. Now let's try to understand how this endpoint test is going to work, right? As you can see here in the service, we have like properly we are getting called this this repository. We are mocking it out here, and we are directly calling that service from here, right? Because we have already instantiated somewhere, right? So yeah, here we are instantiating the service, so it can have a direct call. But in this case, how we can call this routing system, right? Because it's not a part of like any file or something, right? So you cannot directly refer to that specific route from here, right? So potentially what we need to do, we need to create a kind of express app, and we need to call that express app. So make sure like it is returning with the correct request and response, right? Let's try to understand that thing, that how exactly it's going to happen in real life, right? So I'm gonna take a little bit help of the diagram. Here, if you see, this is our, I'm gonna make it bigger a little bit, right? So this is our express app, right? And this express app is going to call our endpoint. So say endpoint is going to be like post call, post products, right? And then here the post product will going to call our service, right? Then service is going to call our repository layer, right? This is going to be potentially repository, right? So now, if we have a call from express, right, the certain endpoint, then it has to call the service, and service has to call repository. Then you can see in this case, if you're gonna write the TDD, right? So you need to mock here, right? You need to mock this one as well as, right? And then mock this one as well as, right? Then only it can be reached to like this whole thing, right? But this is wrong. What we are gonna do, we are going to skip the repository part here, right? We are not interested in repository at all. So what we are going to do, while we are going to call this product, then we are going to call mock the service only, right? So that means while product is needed some kind of the output, then from the service layer, we are going to respond with a kind of mock data, the way we did for our service from the repository. So repository will be out of the picture in this case while we're testing out our endpoint, right? So now you can see this is clear. This is pretty much clear. Let's say we are having a clear picture right here, right? And now how we can do these things, like, because we need to call some kind of API, right, to Express app. So in this case, Supertest is helping us to do so. So how we can do that? Like, Supertest is exactly, it's going to mimic the stuff, like mimic the behavior to the Express, right? So this is Supertest is giving some kind of layer exactly. You can see that layer it's called a request layer, right? So with the help of request, it can be mimic the Express app, right? While we are running the test case, then it will instantiate the Express app inside this Supertest stuff, right? With the help of request, it can call the products also, right? Then service, exactly, we are giving some kind of response to here, right? Which is by mocking by this one, right? Maybe product created or something like that. Then this response exactly coming back to Supertest again, right here, right? This is the way exactly it's gonna work. Supertest will instantiate the Express app with the help of request. It'll going to call that the endpoint. Then endpoint will trigger that the service function, and service function or service layer, we are going to mocking some kind of data from there. Then it is giving back to product, and product giving back to Supertest. Then Supertest will be having the expectation, something like that. So I think this is the exact thing we are going to replicate right there in the source code, right? So let's go to the source code again. So here I'm gonna do like, write some kind of code here. So let's try to import our Express here. Express, because we need the packer also, because we need to use some kind of mock data. So that's why we need packer from packer.js, right? Then let's try to instantiate our Express app here. Right. Then app we need to use express.json, because we are going to deal with the JSON the data, right? So that's why we need to just use like this, right? Then we need to import that specific routes right here, right? Because that is the way we can call it, right? So in that case, let's try to import that one, which is going to be like import catalog routes from right. So catalog routes. And in this case, let's try to use just like we did here, right? In the Express app, you can see we have used the catalog routes, right? So this is the similar way we can use right here as well as app use, right? Catalog routes, because anyway we have only one routes here in the Express app, right? So even if you are not putting this slash also, still it's gonna work, because this is a kind of only root route. And if you have a multiple routes, then you need to use that one as an example, products, category, or something like if you are bifurcating by your path, then you need to mention that. But in this case, it's not necessary at this moment, so let's keep it this way. Now let's try to create some kind of the product, because in this case, the first route we are going to handle, like where we are going to create the product, right? So let's try to create a kind of mock request here. So similar way, maybe rather than typing all these things, we can borrow some code from here. Here, go here, mock request, yes, right here. Copy all these things, mock product, and come over here and put it's a kind of not mock product, mock request. Right, and the name will be fine, description will be fine, stock will be also fine. Then, but one more thing we need to do, that is going to be like price, because while we are going to create the product, then you need to define the price as well as, right? So in this case, packer.commerce price, and definitely it's a kind of string. So, but we don't need the string, right? This is going to be like something number. So, and this is we don't want, because anyway request, all this data is going to be needed in this case. So mock request is fine. Now let's try to add our test case. So first of all, the describe. Here we'll be grouping our endpoints. Like maybe our post request can have multiple scenarios. All the scenarios we will be keeping up in the post product, right? So in this case, again, just to put describe, maybe we can just copy all these things from here and add it here. So here, post, and this is going to be product, right? So make sure, yeah, this is the endpoint. And here, what we can do, first test will be something like this, where we should have to successfully able to create the product. That is our first test scenario, right? So let's try to add that. Perfect. So to fulfill this test case, we need to call our express app, right? So this one, so at least we can reach out to that endpoint. So let's try to utilize this request, all right, which is coming from Supertest, and that is we are going to implement here. Let's try to make a call here, just like we do for our Axios calls. Similar way we are going to do that, but here is a little bit different because of its convention. That is we are going to follow. In this case, const response will be await, and this is going to be request that is coming from the Supertest from here, and we need to pass our app here. That is our express app, which is we have created in line number 6, right? And now we need to call the HTTP call. So request already has like all the series of HTTP calls, just like post, get, delete, whatever. So all these things we can call it. So in this case, we are interested in post call, right? Here in the post, we are going to call our endpoint that is called products, right? And it's a post call. Then we need to send the data as well as, right? So in that case, we have the options to send the data that is called send, and inside the data we can provide a kind of JSON request or something that is we are going to pass, and we need to define like what will be the header. So in that case, set, and this is going to accept, right? This is going to capital letter accept, and application, right? Application JSON. Okay, application JSON. So once we are sending this request, as a response, it has to come back something, right? So let's try to log that one. And based on that, based on the response, we should have to accommodate accordingly. Just like maybe expectation will be once the product has been created, then status code has to be like 201, right? So let's try to add the expectation here. Expect, and it will be response.status, right? To be, it will be 201, right? First, let's try to accomplish this one, then maybe we can add something else. Then we can add this mock request also, right? So this mock request, we need to create it here. Then maybe we can do it right now. Let's try to add it like request body will be mock request. All right, then this request body, we are going to pass it here, right? It's a kind of object. And now let's try to run that one, because I know like we don't have anything right here, but it has to return something, and this is going to be endpoint products. Now let's try to copy this file here, file relative path, right? Then yarn test, right? This one. Perfect. So it seems like it is getting passed, right? Because from here, the catalog routes here, we are returning 201, but you can see like a lot of things are missing here because we are not calling the service, right? So that is we need to do. So in this case, what we need to do, let's try to import this service here, so at least we can have the real functionality where it will be hooking up with this catalog service, right? That is we can return from here. So not the kind of hard-coded data from here, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, let's assume we have const catalog service. Catalog service will be catalog service, and we need to inject the repository as well as, right? In this case, new catalog repository. Right, that is exactly it's coming from here, from this one, not the mock one, right? Mock one, we are going to drop it once we are able to cover the catalog repository, right? But as of now, let's go with this scenario. We have a catalog service, and in this case, like, let's try to get the data that is called const data will be await, right? So catalog service dot create product, and here we are going to put our request that is going to be like request dot body, right? And this data will be returned from here. Return rest status will be 2201 and JSON, and here data. Perfect. So ideally it has to be like the feature, right? So we are calling the catalog service while we are calling this endpoint, then we are handing over the functionality to the catalog service to create the product, and once it is successfully created, then return this data, right? So let's try to do that. So here, terminal test. Now this test should have to be failed, right, with something else, right? You can see now it is getting failed, right? So it says like timeout. So why it is timeout? It's not be able to fulfill the request, right? Because why? Whatever repository we are passing it right here, right? So this is not be able to create the product because it's throwing some kind of error from here. It's not being implemented correctly, right? So how we can do that? So let's go ahead here. So in this case, we need to mock this catalog service, right? So while we are calling these things here, right? Here, while we are calling this endpoint products like the products, post products, then our the create product request from the service has to be mocked here. So here it says like it is able to reach out to the repository, catalog repository, but it says method not implemented, it's returning from there. So which is potentially we don't want to reach out to this repository, right? Because we are not testing the whole pipeline. We are only testing like only the API endpoints only, right? Only routes we are testing out. So in that case, the functionality has to be focused on these routes, not in the other services, maybe services or repository. So let's try to do that. So in this case, we need one more thing that is going to be like, we need to export these things like from catalog service exposed from this specific file. So then only we can mock it. But right now you can see we cannot mock it, right? So even if you try to get this one, right? Catalog routes, right? If you add it here, it doesn't have the public property, right? So how we can do that? So let's try to export here. Export const catalog service. So now we can reach out to the catalog service from there, right? So let's go here and import that catalog service here. Catalog service, right? And this catalog service we can mock it here. Yeah, you can mock it here just like we did for our repository here. Something like this way. Yeah, something like this way we can do that. So let's try to write some code. Just here spy on. What we are going to spy? We are going to spy catalog service. Catalog service. Which function we are going to spy? We are going to spy on the create product. And let's try to do like a mock implementation once. Mock implementation once. Here we're going to return some kind of result value. Result. No, promise result. Promise result. And here we need to pass the product, right? So how we can create the product, because already we have the product factory right here. Go to here, you can see this product factory we have, right? Somehow we need to access this product factory. How we can do that? Because it will going to be wrong if I'm going to import that the catalog service this right here, right? So in this case, let's try to create one directory that is called inside here, that is called utils, right? Right. So inside the util, let's try to create one specific directory which is going to specifically take care of this kind of like the mock data creation. That is, we can say pictures. Pictures. And inside the pictures, let's try to create one file that is going to be like index ts. Maybe we can move to something else, but let's try to add it in the index.ts file. Later stage, maybe while we'll be having more pictures, then we can create individual file, then we can export that specific individual file to .index.ts file. But as of now, we don't have much more data or much more things to do. So let's try to move this one from here, right? Cut it here and add it here. And this is going to be like capital letter, because while we are exposing something from outside, or maybe you are exporting certain module, right? And which is not kind of like, you know, private stuff, private scope, then make sure it is something like this, capitalized always. Yeah, but it's up to you, like the way you can use it, that's up to you. There's a kind of flexibility also, but in my case, I'm just always using like this way. So it can be identical. This is a kind of public, it's from public scope or some private scope, something like that. So now here, let's try to import all these things, pics, factory, and packers and products, everything. So quick and missing all imports, right? So now it seems like everything has been resolved, but why it is saying like factory is not? Okay, so we need to import factory from here. Right, now it is gone. Perfect. So now let's try to fix the broken test cases here in this inside the service, because we have removed the product factory from there. So let's remove this one and use the things. These are the places are being broken. So let's try to import product, capital product factory. Let's try to import that. Now it's add import from util fixers, right? So now this is perfect. Two more places are being used. Let's try to replace this one and this one as well as, right? So now you can see we are reusing that similar thing like from the pictures, and which is going to be useful for our rest of all the test cases. While product will be necessary, then product factory will be responsible to create all those things. Right. So in this case also we can create the product as of now here. So let's try to create the product right after the request body, right? Const product will be product factory will be build, right? Only one single product is needed. So in this case, let's try to resolve this product here. Right. Now this is going to be perfectly fine at this time, because it is going to be mimicking from here, right? We are mocking this catalog service and it will return successfully. But we need to make sure like that response, whatever the response body, it will come from this request, from this endpoint, it has to be matched with this specific product also, which is potentially we are returning from here, right? So let's try to do that. Perfect. So now our first test case has to be fulfilled correctly, right? Let's try to spin the test case. So yarn test, right? The absolute part of the specific file. Now let's try to test it. Perfect. So now it is getting passed, right? So our first test case is getting passed correctly. So now let's move forward to add a couple of more test cases, right? Let's try to omit this empty spaces, so it's going to be like more readable. All right, so now you can see the file structure and all. Maybe some of you already told me you guys are not be able to clearly visible in the smaller screen. If you guys finding trouble to see these things like or maybe smaller for you, then definitely you can look at that specific episode. I have already attached the source code, right? Then you can compare your file directory structure with the specific episode source code, right? But anyway, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna increase the font size a little bit. So let's go ahead to settings, and here 19 maybe is full. Yeah, a little bit bigger now. Now let's go ahead and add one more test case here, right? So our agenda will be like cover all the test cases, whatever necessary use cases will be for this particular endpoint, right? And in this case, let's try to add one more. I'm going to copy all these things from here and add it there. And this time it has to be like should response with validation error, should response with validation error. That is going to be 400, right? Because you can see while we are dealing with like a post request or any kind of request where where data exchange is necessary, then we need to validate our request, right? You cannot create any product like which is exactly it's passing from the front end or maybe some kind of client, then beforehand we need to validate correctly, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, our request body will be similar, right? And maybe we can skip some of the things from the request body, that is we can see. And in this case, product will be not necessary because we are going to evaluate the error only, not the precise product, right? And then we are not going to mimicking the stuff also because we don't want to reach to the catalog service at all. We just want to return everything from these product endpoints from here. Somehow here we need to validate this stuff, right? So in this case, let's try to do that. We are going to removing all these things from here. Request is fine, but request body, what we're going to do, we're going to deconstruct all these things from request body. Technically, we are going to skip one of the parameters from here as an example, like maybe name or maybe description or stock something, right? So let's assume we're going to ignore the name, right? We are not providing the name. So in this case, it should have to throw some kind of error that is going to be like 400. And response body has to be something like name should not be empty. Name should not be empty, right? So this is the test case, exactly the outcome, right? So while we are not sending the name, it has to send some kind of like the validation error. This is the use case. It should have to be catching in the real life also, right? So while you are calling this endpoint, if you are not providing the name, then it has to throw some kind of this kind of error, right? So let's try to run that one. Now potentially it has to be fail. So now you can see this is fail, right? And because we are not implementing any kind of validation check right here inside this one, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, a couple of library we are going to install, right? Let's try to install those libraries, all right? Yarn class transformer and class validator, right? Inside the routes, right, here we need to add some code. So before that, let's try to go to DTO. Here we have not created the DTO directory, I guess, right? No, we have not. So let's try to create the DTO directory. I think you know better what exactly DTO it is. DTO is in general data transfer object, which is responsible to parse the data or transforming the data, some form of the data to a structured data, right? So maybe you can say like JSON to a particular class or particular class to a kind of JSON output, something like that. So all those things we are keeping inside the DTO. So let's try to create one DTO file that is going to be like product.dto.ts. Right. As we have already installed these two packages that is called like class transformer and class validator, and we are going to take advantage of all that specific library to create this DTO, right? So in this case, export class, create product request, and first of all will be name, always string, and all right, so these are the parameters are needed, but in this case we need to mark all these things to a mandatory parameter. That is, first of all, it has to be name has to be string, is string, right? So these are some kind of decorator which is responsible to validate that specific parameter, right? You can say it's a kind of property decorator which is going to be validate that specific property is it a string or not. And one more thing we can say like is not empty, because we are not accepting the name as a kind of empty parameter, right? That is we can do, but sometimes description is perfectly fine. Maybe sometimes it is coming empty. We can say it's all right. Maybe some product cannot have description, but we can add it. Anyway, next, like let's go with the is number, because price is a kind of number, So we need to check it log whether user is providing a number or not, and we need to provide a kind of value also. Price shouldn't supposed to be 0, so we can say mean can be 1, right? So this mean we should supposed to import here. Yes, right, mean. And stock also, it has to be number. Stock can be 0 also. Is number, right? So these are the property we are going to accommodate for our create request. And now let's go ahead here inside the API, right? Here in the routes. So in this case, to validate our request, we need to go ahead and create a kind of validator, which is going to validate our request. So let's go ahead here in the inside the util directory. Let's try to create a kind of file that is going to be called request validator .ts, right? Here inside the request validator, I'm gonna add some code quickly, and I will make you understand once I have done from here. So here in this validation error function, right? So we are taking any kind of input from here, right? And try to validate it if there is a kind of error involved by checking out by using this validate function, which is from our class validator. And if there is a kind of error or involved in the input, right? Then we are returning like all the errors, whatever the error we are finding right here. And if it is not there, then we are returning false. And you can see this promise exactly, it's a bunch of validation errors. It should have to be errors. Let's try to put some kind of errors here. Errors. So it will going to be meaningful. So now this promise exactly, this is validation or error we are importing from here. The type of the return type of the specific error is going to be validation error, right? Otherwise false. So this is the function which is responsible for fetching out all the errors, otherwise return false. Now let's come over here in the request validator. All right, so let's try to understand what request validator is doing. Request validator is accepting some kind of type, just like we have created something like this, right? The create product request. It's a kind of class, right? That specific things we are going to pass it here, right? Pass it here. Here, this type also going to be same, just like this type, right? And body, we're accepting the request body, right? And here we are simply just to try to convert all these things, all this type, whatever type we are accepting here, along with the body, so at least we can get the instance of that specific class object, right? So, and we are just to try to evaluate that specific input if there are kind of errors. So by using this function, right? And if there are errors, then try to concate all the errors, right? And send a form of like, message, error message. Otherwise, error as a false and input whatever the type we are passing here, right? That specific input we can just like pass it here as well as, right? Cool. Then I think we are pretty much good at this point here. So let's go ahead here in the API catalog routes here, and here we need to validate that thing. Perfect. So let's try to validate our request here, right? Const await request validator, and here we're going to pass our class something like create product request, and here we are going to pass our request body, request.body, right? And it will return some kind of errors, right? So let's try to check that one. Errors and input, right? Which is we are going to pass it here. Perfect. So now you can see we need to evaluate this error, right? So let's try to check it out. If errors are there, errors is true, right? So then return res.status, where we will be passed by the status code, just like 400, right? Then json.errors. Perfect. Because error is a kind of form of string, so then definitely we will be getting some kind of data structure, just like errors equal to something, right? Perfect. So now you can see our request validator is successfully added, right? So let's try to spin our test case right now. Perfect. So now we can see our test case is getting passed, right? So we are successfully able to validate this error. And if you can see here, right? So if you go to this case here, inside this one, I'm gonna close rest of all. And if you put the response here, let's say console log will be response. This is our exact response, which is we have received through our API call. Then you can see this is response, and yeah, you can see cannot post, all right, product 400, and the error message also something like this: name shouldn't be entry, right? So this is the things which is we are expected here, right? So I think this is cool. So right now this is done, right? So next, one more test case we need to add, like if something is going wrong internally, then we should have to get some kind of a response also there, right? So how we can do that? So let's try to copy that one, because this is the thing exactly which is we are mimicking from here on the right. So this one is it's a kind of happy part, and this is kind of like a scenario test case where we are validating the error. But what if something is going wrong here in the catalog service? It should not be able to create the product, or something is going wrong there, like maybe throwing some kind of error. Then how we can handle that? That test case or that scenario also we need to handle it, right? So let's try to copy this first test case from here and add it here, and add some kind of description here. This is going to be something like should response with an internal error code 500, right? So request is fine, mock request, we are sending to create product, that is also perfectly fine. But in this case, we are not going to expect that product is not required, because we are not resolving any product here. Instead of that, we are going to reject some kind of error here. This is going to be reject and new error, and here error occurred. Yeah, this is the exact same message we are going to expect here as well. So this is going to be something like this, and this status code has to be 500, right? So now let's try to run this test case, and potentially it's going to be fail, that's for sure, because we are not handling anything right there in the catalog routes here, right? So we need to handle that, right? So let's wait for the outcome of this specific test. Now you can see this is getting fail, right? So let's try to cover it up. So how we can cover that? So here, let's go to catalog routes. Here inside this one, I'm gonna wrap it up, whole thing with the try catch, right? So let's try to move everything from here to here, right? Let's try to omit these empty lines, so we can have more clarity on the code. Good. Good. So now in the error one, while we are throwing some kind of error from here, right, it has to return with a kind of status code, which is potentially is going to be 500 or something like that, right? So let's try to cast this error, kind of error equal to error as error. Okay, now we have to return something that is called res dot status code. This is going to be 500, and session will be error dot message. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and check it out. I'm gonna intentionally I will be adding some kind of like error message here. Only let's try to put this on the error, let's say. Now let's try to spin our test case. Perfect. So you can see it is getting failed. So what exactly? It is returning like error occurred on the create product, because that error we are going to throw it from here, right? So while we are calling that create product service, it is throwing some kind of error. So though we are mimicking here, if on the real time, if it is going to throw this error from here, then it has to be captured here, right, in this section. That is what we are testing out. So let's try to revert back to expect that error occurred on the create product. So at least we can have a good cover on this specific test case as well as. So let's try to revert back. So now it is going to be success. Perfect. So now our create product is successfully done, right? So that's all for this episode. In the next episode, we are going to cover on the edit products and get and delete products as well as, right? And partially we are going to discuss some of the topic related to the clean architecture also in that episode. Let's take a quick break and see you in another episode. Bye-bye.